Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erica Borneman. I'm the Director of Vermont Emergency Management, and I want to welcome you to our third and final day of the 14th Annual Vermont Emergency Preparedness Conference. I'm so glad you all could join us today, and we have a little event to get us kicked off, which we are so glad and honored to do every year. We always stop and pause and do a little recognition of the great emergency management professionals that are out there. So moving into our schedule for this afternoon, you'll see that we have some awards and announcements first thing. And then we have a great slate of sessions for you this afternoon. Around Vermont arts and culture and disaster resilience, as well as the capabilities of the Vermont National Guard. And we'll also have a presentation from the new Department of Homeland Security Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. And so they'll be closing out our 14th annual preparedness conference this year. If this is your first day joining us, we'll have a quick note in just a minute about how to use Teams. But I also just want to take a minute to thank everybody for your commitment to continuing education and continuing learning around emergency management. Unfortunately, we can't be in person to do this, but I want to thank our Vermont emergency management staff who have worked so hard to put on a really great virtual session that's interactive as well as informative. With that, I think I'm going to hand it over to either Emily or Hillary to just talk a little bit about the Teams tutorial.
I'll take that, Erica. So for those of you who haven't joined us the last couple of days, a couple of things to note in Teams. In this virtual space for the conference as a whole, there's only select things that you'll be able to do. You should be able to see the other folks that are here today. That's using that people button at the top of your screen that is highlighted on the slide in yellow. Directly next to that is a chat bubble that will allow you to communicate with us and the presenters and each other. Sometimes presentations will ask for participant input and feedback, so please do use that chat function for that. And then directly next to that is the emoticons that allows you to give thumbs up or hearts or applaud for people, so definitely feel free to use that. You will notice in the session we're in right now, excellent, good examples there. In the session we're in now, you don't have the ability to use your camera or microphone. We've found in the past that sometimes people accidentally turn those on and it can create problems for the conference as a whole. However, you will have those capabilities, as well as the ones I just noted, over in the lobby space. So in between sessions, so you noted on the agenda that Director Borneman just went through, we had a bunch of breaks in there. We'll actually even have a longer one this morning or first thing. There's some time built in for you to just go and have conversations with folks and treat it as if we've just left the conference space and we're standing in the lobby and we're asking questions of folks and we're hearing feedback from others. And that's why you'll be able to unmute your microphone and turn on your video in the lobby so it can enhance those relationship building exercises. With that, I'll turn it back over to Director Borneman.
And I just want to, for those of you who are just joining us for the first time today, I do want to introduce some folks that are really integral to the success of today's sessions. Our lobby host is Harry Shopman, who is a Northeastern Regional Coordinator, and he will be carrying the conversation in the lobby. Event support is Hillary Scott. She's our state training administrator. She's already been putting links in the chat for you folks. And then, of course, our Master of Ceremonies, Rich Cogliano, who is our Southern Regional Coordinator and Master of Disaster Extraordinaire and source of all-around entertainment. With that, we'll get to what's really my favorite part of the annual preparedness conference, and that is our awards. to me, it's really important to take a minute and recognize the hard work of dedicated emergency management directors and coordinators throughout the state. It's especially in the past 18 months, it's been particularly challenging. Emergency management directors have been asked to do what they didn't necessarily think they would ever have to do before, just as emergency managers like us have had to do that as well. And many of them have risen to the challenge beautifully. And they are leaders and sources of trust in their communities. Just a little bit about emergency management directors in general, for those of you who don't know. Every local jurisdiction is directed by law to appoint an emergency management director or coordinator for their town. That emergency management director is in charge of ensuring that the town has a local emergency management plan and that the local organization for emergency management is functioning. Really, what that means is the town is prepared to respond to a disaster of any kind, as well as carry out the recovery. And that's a daunting task, and it's not a feat that just anybody can accomplish. So it's really a testament to the skills and to the abilities of our emergency management directors. And that's also a testament to who we are going to be recognizing today. Also, in order to be eligible for this award, we want to see that the emergency management director in question or to be awarded is enrolled in the Vermont Emergency Management EMD certification program, or has completed trainings within the program. You can see there a list on the screen, a list of our previous emergency management directors of the year, and many of us know those folks very well. We work with them a lot, and it's because they're engaged and they're impassioned, and they are the central point for disaster preparedness, response, and recovery work. With that, I am very, very honored to recognize Chief Tom Hanley from Middlebury Police Department in the town of Middlebury as our 2021 Vermont Emergency Management Director of the Year. Over the past 18 months, Chief Hanley has led Middlebury's COVID-19 response. That has included the critical function of coordinating with Porter Hospital and Middlebury College, among others, to set up testing facilities, procure supplies, and plan for medical surges at the healthcare facility. Throughout the pandemic, Chief Hanley has also ensured his constituents were provided with current COVID-19 information. He prepared and distributed more than 220 bulletins released to the public, sharing information from the Department of Health, Centers for Disease Control, the Office of Governor Phil Scott, Vermont Emergency Management, and any other source of information that would help keep the citizens of Middlebury protected and informed, as well as surrounding towns. Chief Hanley's commitment to keep the community informed during these challenging times has been very much appreciated by the residents of not only Middlebury, but also surrounding towns. The town manager and select board have received many emails and phone calls praising and thanking Chief Hanley, not only for keeping them informed, but also providing the opportunity to smile with his dry Irish sense of humor and his tendency to use a baseball or hunting fishing analogy to drive home the point. I hope you all will join me in congratulating Chief Hanley for this fantastic recognition of his work, and hope you get a chance to talk with him in person at some point, because he is really a wealth of knowledge and is an institution in Middlebury.
So keeping with tradition, and we weren't able to test this ahead of time, so this was a surprise. Chief Hanley, your microphone should be able to be unmuted at this time if you would like to say something and if the IT works appropriately. So Chief Hanley, can you unmute your mic?
There we go.
Excellent.
I just want to say is nobody works in a bubble, and there were people doing far more engaged work than I did here, just kind of coordinating things and kind of keeping people loose during a very time when there's a lot of anxiety out there. But I had great working relationships with Mike Leiden at Porter Hospital, all the folks up at Middlebury College. We had our weekly meetings, and of course, very supported by the folks in town. And this is a great community. I mean, we didn't have the issues that might have happened in other areas, and we were able to smooth a lot of things out and a lot of anxiety out. So it was just, I've been here, the chief, 30 years, and the emergency manager here, I don't know how many years, a whole bunch of those, officially and unofficially. So having that kind of background, I think, was really helpful. People know who I am. I live here, been here forever, and I was just glad it worked out for everybody. But we're not done yet, apparently, as things are still going on. But thank you.
Well, Chief, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to being able to come to Middlebury next week and present this award to you in person. So look forward to that.
Thank you, and I'm humbled.
I'll also just note on the previous slide, I had showed a list of the names of emergency management directors. We have a local emergency management director plaque hung up in the State Emergency Operations Center as a reminder to folks of the very important relationships that we all have, and that and how important local emergency management director are in their roles in local communities. So hopefully we can invite you up sometime and prove to you we engraved your name on the wall at the State EOC.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to do a couple more recognitions. As I mentioned before, there is a emergency management director certification program that is available for any local emergency management director or emergency manager. Doesn't necessarily have to be an emergency management director, just an emergency manager, that provides leaders and emergency management organizations with knowledge and skills to effectively manage local disasters. It includes all of the trainings in FEMA's professional development certification series. So it actually is kind of a dual certification when you receive it. And when it's completed, presented with a certificate, as well as your name will go on our website as a certified emergency management director, as well as you'll have a recognition at the Emergency Preparedness Conference. And I just want to point out, the training requirements for the emergency management director certification, I think are a balance of challenging and with as well as qualifications standards to be able to demonstrate proficiency as an emergency manager, proficiency in that learning that folks have taken part of. So it is a good balance between training as well as proficiency-based standards. And so I want to take a minute to congratulate our newly certified emergency management directors who have completed their certification in the past year. Up here, you'll see Caitlin Root from St. Michael's College, Vermont Emergency Management's own planning section chief, Lee Dorff. Lainey Knapp, who now works at the Department of Labor. We're hoping that maybe we can get her back someday. She was working for Vermont Emergency Management as a temp, and she does help us out in the SEOC sometimes. So she's been a great resource. Stephen Ragno from St. Michael's College, as well as Victoria Littlefield, Tori Littlefield from Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission. I'll just point out Tori Littlefield is integral on the State Emergency Response Commission, as well as handling and leading some of the changes around local emergency planning commissions. We work very closely with Tori, and she's an excellent resource. And of course, we have a list of additional folks that were too shy to put their picture up, but I do want to recognize them. Eric Foran from Vermont Emergency Management, he is our state exercise administrator. And I'll just point out that he is currently in Northern Macedonia, assisting them with evaluating a NATO exercise through the National Guard State Partnership Program. And that just, again, speaks to his level of professionalism and knowledge that they were able to bring that over to Northern Macedonia and support that program. Eric Haversang from St. Michael's College, Glenn Herron from Vermont Emergency Management has been, and I'm sorry, I'm very biased. I'm going to sing the praises of our VAM employees because I am proud of them for receiving their Emergency Management Director certifications. But also, these are folks that have worked for a year and a half in the State Emergency Operations Center in COVID-19 response and really exemplify the most excellent tenets of being an emergency manager. Thomas Norton and Caitlin Root, as I mentioned, Elizabeth Valentini, Christian Voigt, and Maxwell Zwiener, all from St. Michael's College through their program there. So congratulations to everybody who has completed your certification, and I definitely encourage folks who are interested in this you can visit the Vermont Emergency Management website to learn more about the certification program. It is worthwhile, well worth your time, and certainly is a valuable learning opportunity for those that are looking to get into emergency management. Well, that concludes our award portion of the afternoon. And again, thanks everybody for joining us for that portion of the afternoon. I want to take a minute to call out. We have a special event coming up in January, which is a learning day that we have scheduled. Please keep your eye out for more information on this. It's going to be held on January 20th at Lake Maury Resort. It's a one-day in-person emergency preparedness conference. We have, even though we've had such great learning opportunities with the virtual emergency preparedness conference, there really is no substitute for the relationships that you're able to foster, those conversations that you're able to have in an in-person setting. So we've scheduled a learning day at Lake Maury Resort on January 20th. So save that date, and we will be sending out a call for speakers for that opportunity coming up real soon. And we also have, and I'm going to hand it over to Emily here so she can give you a reminder about another meeting that is coming up, an important learning opportunity here just this very day.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Borneman. So many of our local folks on the line may have seen that we have now issued statewide guidance for the regional emergency management committees. These are those regional organizations that are focused on all hazards. So with the expansion of the LEPC to encompass statewide, we're filling that void with the regional emergency management committees. So again, that guidance has been released. We know that people may have questions about that guidance or want the summary of it, and you can do that tonight. So at the conclusion of today's conference, if you come back to us at 5:30 this evening, we'll be reviewing that guidance document and taking your questions. So please, if you haven't seen that link, feel free to send me an email. The regional planning commissions all have access to it as well, and may have been sending it out to you. But my email address is up on the screen, emily.harris@vermont.gov. I'd be happy to include you in that. This guidance document is available on our website right now, and the implementation plans for each of these regional emergency management committees will be due on November 1st. So time is coming up quickly. Please join us tonight if you have any questions about that statewide guidance document.
Thanks so much, Emily. Before I hand it over to Rich, who is our Master of Ceremonies, I just want to take another opportunity to thank everybody for joining us for these 3 days. We have really so enjoyed the excellent presentations that have been provided, and I hope to see you all in January in person. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about emergency management in general. My email, I'm very, very available to pretty much everybody at any time. So again, be safe, and thank you very much for joining us. Rich, I think you're on tap to take it away here.
I'm so happy you used the words on tap. That I was just typing a message to Emily, and I used the word. So, funny little side note. Anyway, welcome everyone. As everyone has already said, welcome to day 3 of the 2021 Virtual Vermont Emergency Preparedness Conference. I'm excited to see all of you here, and we're excited for a great day of presentations. Now, we have a little bit of time in our schedule, so what we're doing is at 1:30, our first presentation will start, and that is how VACDARN can support municipal resilience. VACDARN is the Vermont Arts and Cultural Disaster and Resilience Network, and it'll be launching several initiatives in 2021-2022. Including establishing disaster supply caches in 14 sites around the state. So we're going to hear from Carol Devlin. She's going to tell us all about VACDARN and how it can support municipal resilience. Following our break, after that, we'll then hear from Colonel Randy Gates of the Vermont National Guard, talking about the Guard's capability and response. And finally, our last presentation of the day will be the DHS Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. So those presentations will start in just under an hour at 1:45. Until then, we have some time. So I'm going to give you just a little snippet that there is a survey coming out at the end of the day today. That survey will be about what you thought of our conference. What did you think of the speakers and the topics? How did the virtual conference go for you? What are some strengths and areas for improvement and things that we could do differently in the future? Now, as you heard the director say, we're gearing up for a one-day event in January in person at Lake Maury. We're very excited to see all of you in person and do this in person. But we'll also be planning very shortly our 2022 15th, believe it or not, 15th annual Vermont Emergency Preparedness Conference that will be held in September of next year. At least that's our target right now. And we're hoping very much that we're not on the epsilon or umsalon version of COVID-19, and we can actually do that in person. So with that, folks, I'm going to recommend head over to the lobby. Harry is there. He's ready and waiting. He has his tap shoes on. We're going to talk. A lot of our emergency management staff will be there. A lot of our EMDs will be there. Chat with us, interact with us. If there's a question that you have, there's something you want to know that isn't related to one of our topics, now's the perfect time to go over there and chat with us. And we'll see you back here in this room, ready to go with our VACDARN presentation at 1:45. Hi, folks, it is 1:45 and we are ready to go with our next speaker. We will be hearing from Carol Devlin, and Carol has had many positions in her professional career: college professor, academic advisor, study abroad coordinator, nonprofit administrator, and assistant town clerk. Ongoing themes in many of those positions have included risk management and organization. These are areas of interest and skills have served her well as she tackled her current position as Bolton's assistant town clerk. Carol will be talking to us about the Vermont Arts and Culture Disaster and Resilience Network and the several initiatives they will be launching in 2021-2022, including establishing disaster supply caches in 14 sites around the state, offering multiple emergency preparedness workshops for town clerks, historical societies, public librarians, hosting 2 collections salvage workshops led by a professional conservator, leading resilience trainings for artists, and adding case studies, including lessons learned when a town office flooded, and other resources to the website. I'm so happy to have Carol here with us today. She is also joined by Rachel Onuff. Rachel has been at several Vermont Emergency Preparedness conferences. We're happy to welcome her back as well. So here are Carol and Rachel talking about how VACDARN can support municipal resilience. I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi. Contrary to what the screen might say, I'm Carol Devlin, not Amy Grover. And I'm going to be talking to you about a town office flood we had. Bear with me while I get my screen share up and PowerPoint going. If you have questions or want to contact me afterwards, my email address is assistbolton@gmavt.net. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have either at the end of the presentation or via email. Before we get to the emergency Bolton faced in December 2019, I'd like to take a moment to address where the town office stood in terms of emergency preparedness. Before VACDARN came into existence, I worked closely with Rachel Ona from Vasara to begin improving our emergency preparedness. A lot of the work we did is similar to the training and support that VACDARN is offering to municipal governments, museums, libraries, galleries, theaters, and cultural sites and organizations throughout the state. This training has proved to be invaluable in developing the knowledge and tools to face a crisis calmly and with confidence. My first step with Rachel was a workshop Vasara presented in May 2018, entitled Clerks Training, Emergency Preparedness, Response for Records Management. This workshop provided an excellent overview to emergency preparedness and gave us some tools to get started. Emergency preparedness is really a cycle, and this is my version of the cycle, not Rachel. So if there's any errors, Rachel, I'm sorry. Basically, for me, risk management, something just went wrong there. Getting used to a different computer for mine and how it's sensitive. Sorry about that. With me, I start at risk assessment, and once I've dealt with risk assessment, then we move on to a disaster plan, and from there making preparations and hopefully going back to risk assessment and just continuing to fine-tune things. Unfortunately, life is life, and all of us will have to deal with disaster of one form or another at some point in time. And once we have a disaster, we move on. Sorry, the mouse on this is much different from mine. We move on to the triage stage, which is another type of assessment. In triage, you're assessing the damage and trying to assess what type of priorities you're going to have. Then you move into the recovery phase where you're trying to take care of cleanup or dealing with damage and what's your response to the issues. Then you move on to response assessment and back to risk assessment, and it just keeps going through the cycle. For us, our number one priority has and always will be the vault. As town clerks, our primary function is the preservation and maintenance of the town's land records and vital statistics. Therefore, after the workshop, we immediately focused on maintaining an accurate inventory of our vault and doing a detailed risk assessment that included, sorry, again, the keyboard's not doing what I want. Included a doing an on-site investment with updating our vault inventory, a risk assessment of what were the risks in the vault for flood, for smoke, for fire. Did we have backups of everything? Rachel came and gave us some advice and did a quick risk assessment with us. And during that, Rachel suggested that one of the first things we could do, and the easiest thing we could do, would be to reduce the risk of water damage by moving some things from the bottom shelves and making sure that nothing valuable was on those shelves. We did that within 24 hours of our meeting with Rachel. Then we just started doing an annual assessment, updating our risk, trying to figure out what little things we could pick away at over the year, and to develop and build on what we already have, and to familiarize ourselves with what we had. But we didn't really write a disaster plan. It didn't exist yet. There were rudimentary notes. We had some rough ideas and we had thought about it, but there was no actual plan. Let's see. So by December 30th, 2019, we had a strong understanding of the risks to the vault and what we needed to do to mitigate those risks. But we didn't really have a lot spelled out. And it turned out that just having thought about it was a good thing. Now, we're going to move on to our flood. And I want you to imagine for a minute that you were walking into your office on the Monday before New Year's. As you turn to disarm the alarm system, you realize you hear a soothing waterfall, and then you realize that the soothing waterfall sound is coming from inside the building. It's not so soothing anymore. You quickly turn to see standing water everywhere you look and run to follow the waterfall sound and discover what looks like someone pouring 2 one-gallon jugs of water simultaneously from the kitchen ceiling. On the kitchen floor is 3 inches of standing water and the beginnings of a slurry from the disintegrating ceiling tiles that have fallen into the water. The kitchen slurry is spraying up onto every available surface, and water covers the surfaces of everything in the kitchen. Portions of ceiling tiles have floated into the conference room, and water is everywhere through the building. This is how Amy Grover, Bolton Town Clerk, started her day on Monday, December 30th, 2019. Bolton's hot water heater, which had been installed in the ceiling when the building was new in 2008, had burst. Post-flood plumbing forensics also revealed that the pipe from the drain pan was blocked by a piece of solder. Bottom line, our hot water heater had catastrophically failed and flooded virtually all of the office, every room in the building. The kitchen and much of the conference room had 3 inches of water, while the main office, actually, let me back up to the kitchen. Here, this first image is about 45 minutes after the water had been turned off, and you can see that our molding, the molding is a 6-inch molding, and the water line is about half of that. The water, once it had turned off, went down in the kitchen as water moved into the main office area and the conference room and increased the levels in those rooms. In this picture of the kitchen, you really get a sense of the ceiling tiles and the slurry on the floor, and you can see where the tiles had come from. The hot water heater was right in this tile area. And then this is the bathroom, which also had about 3 inches of water in it. This is the conference room. You can see a huge puddle over here where the water was the deepest in the conference room. Literally every corner of the room was wet. There's also papers. This is after we'd started bringing some paper in to spread out that had gotten damp. This is the conference room quite a while later, hours later. When we'd moved stuff out from the walls, all of this stuff had been removed from some shelves. If you have pressboard in any of your offices, be aware that the pressboard acts as a wicking device, and the shelves were wet several feet above where the water actually was. The middle image is from the kitchen into my office area, and I was sitting in this chair about 4 feet out of the picture range, at one point waiting for a phone call and playing with my feet, splashing in the water because it was about an inch and a half deep under my desk area. So the main office, the town's clerk's office, and this office, which is our zoning administrator's office, had about a 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches of water. This is our town clerk's office. And we really dreaded opening the vault, but we had to find out whether or not it had also flooded. Fortunately, thanks to the work we had already done with Rachel, we knew that the most important papers and documents were safe and secure because there was no way the water had gotten that high. So when we opened the door and saw all of this standing water, and this is after it had gone down a bit, we were much less anxious than we would have been without having done our work with Rachel. Water was throughout the vault, and the worst of it was back in this corner. We did have some things there, and all of that got damaged, but again, nothing was important. As always, the first concern in any disaster should be safety. Is it safe to be in the building? And we determined it was safe as long as people had rubber boots on to protect themselves for electricity and water. Even though we had turned the electricity off in the building, we still wanted to take that security precaution. And we needed to have earplugs on because, as you'll see very soon, sound became a huge issue. Part of triage, once you've determined what the safety issues are, is to determine what needs to be done and who's going to do it. We didn't really sit down and discuss this or follow a plan for this part. It was based on instinct and the things we had talked about and thought about before this incident occurred. Amy immediately called ServPro after having to track down their number. ServPro was great and arrived 40 minutes later and immediately started extracting water and the slurry with their truck-mounted industrial dry vac. This is towards the end of their time with the shop vac. 2.5 hours later, the carpet in this room, which is where I was playing in the water and splashing things around, the carpet looked dry. If you felt it, it still felt wet, but it had looked dry. They'd gotten so much out of it. By mid-afternoon, they had installed, mid-afternoon, they had installed 4 or 5 of these industrial dehumidifiers. There was one in each major room. There was also these industrial fans, and we had 40 of the industrial fans set up by Monday afternoon, and they kept adding more. All of this equipment ran nonstop for the next 8 days, with the office temperature turned up to 80 degrees to use heat to assist in the drying. We had removed all the furniture from the walls, and had spread papers and what we could of wet documents, or in one case, there's a poster out on flat surfaces, and basically created a very challenging obstacle course walking through the building. Sound measurements recorded over 84 decibels, and the temperature hovered around 90 degrees. This was really not a pleasant work environment, but we had to deal with it and move on to do the best we could while we recovered. On Friday, ServPro determined that the walls weren't drying quickly enough, so they drilled 3-inch holes every 12 to 18 inches on all the exterior walls, added more fans blowing directly into the wall to help with the drying there. Okay. While waiting for ServPro, we moved everything we could off the floors, and we were relieved to discover that risk assessment and abatement meant that almost everything in the vault was over 3 feet off the floor, and the only things lost to water were some office supplies, spare archival banker boxes, trifold displays, and a sandwich board. The earlier assessment and risk reduction measures had paid off in a huge way. Nothing, absolutely nothing irreplaceable was affected. Now, we weren't so lucky in the office. All of the computers and supporting electronics were on the floor. We quickly got them onto tables and dried them off, and after consulting our IT specialists, we opened the casings and to our relief discovered the insides were perfectly dry. We left the casings off so that any residual moisture could dry. Cords were either trashed if they were too damaged or put in recycling bins to keep them out of the water. Through all of this, Amy soldiered on, coming into the office every 8 hours, 24 hours a day for 8 days to empty the vault dehumidifier. ServPro had been unable to run a line from that dehumidifier to the sink because the vault door had to be closed when people weren't in the office. And Amy also had to complete critical work on payroll, the end of the year financials, and a FEMA application, which was under deadline. The vault dehumidifier alone drained 35 gallons of water from just the vault. Amy also regularly provided updates via Front Porch Forum, Facebook, and the town email lists about expected opening dates and how to contact her if documents were needed before the office reopened. Several researchers needed land record information, which was provided via fax and email. And this part of this crisis actually turned out to be excellent preparation for how we operated during COVID, because a couple of months later, we had to close for a couple of weeks and then had the office closed to researchers for longer, even though we were in the office. But we had already discovered that we could get information to the people who needed it and ways of getting around how do you deal with a card index if people can't access that. On Monday, ServPro concluded that the building was dry and removed their equipment. The cleanup took hours, washing the ceiling tile slurry off the kitchen walls, floors, stove, and cabinets, cleaning the bathroom, vacuuming the floor before moving furniture back, reassembling the computers. By the way, all the computers were tested and worked. We assessed the furniture damage, and bottom line on that, pressed board, also known as sawdust and glue, does not like water, and anything made of it collapsed when touched. And by collapsed, I mean Amy put her index finger on a bookshelf and it fell apart onto the floor. On Tuesday, the insurance adjuster, plumber, electrician, and contractor all came to check things out. Now, after every disaster, whether it's a large one or a relatively small one, it's vital to do what people in theater call a post-mortem or a response assessment to determine what worked, what didn't work, and what lessons were learned. Here's our post-mortem. We knew where a shutoff valve was for the water and where the electrical panel were. It turned out there was a more accessible shutoff valve, but at least we got the water turned off quickly. ServPro the Stowe-Winooski franchise is absolutely fantastic. They were very responsive, highly professional, and worked like a well-oiled machine. And their phone number is now located in several places in our office. Knowledge of steps that had already been taken decreased anxiety and stress as we did the damage assessment. Damage was significantly less than it would have been because all the documents in the vault had already been mitigated and protected from water damage. We only lost a couple of maps which were damaged, and they were not in the vault and were easily replaced. We also discovered there's a big advantage to a building being built on a concrete slab. This actually greatly reduced the dangers of mold, and by getting SurfPro in as quickly as we didn't even have to replace the carpet. It was clean, it was dry, and we've had no problems of mold in the almost 2 years since. Negative observations. The shutoff to the hot water heater was difficult to reach. We didn't know the location of the main shutoff. We didn't have all the phone numbers we needed immediately available. And all the CPUs were on the floor. We only lucked out and didn't have to replace every computer in the office. Now, we took a lot of steps to reduce future risks. Here's our new hot water our new hot water heater, which is located on the floor in the bathroom inside a drain pan. Then over here, we have one of the best things that we purchased. This is called a Cricket, and it's right behind this pipe on the floor of the drain pan. And the Cricket provides an alarm if there's about 1/8 of an inch of water in that drain pan. There'll be an alarm that goes directly to our security firm, who will then contact town employees, so we'll know that there's a problem as soon as the problem occurs instead of about 48 hours after it had occurred. We also installed humidity and temperature gauges in the vault so we can check it regularly and know what's happening in our vault. All electronics have been raised off the floor on metal, either shelving units like this one on the right, or here we've got them on monitor stands. And if you look at the picture above, I almost didn't put this picture in because it wasn't until I took it that I realized the wires I'd very carefully gotten off the floor. Over time, the command strips either became brittle and the hooks broke, or they came off the wall. And I've got stuff ordered so I can take care of getting the cords back off the floor, so that's not an issue anymore. We also built custom-made, my mind just went blank on the word, pallets to raise the file cabinets. So our file cabinets would be less likely to rust if they got wet, and so that the bottom drawers would have that added protection from moisture. We also worked with Rachel to determine whether or not our older books had been damaged from the moisture in the air, and both Amy and I received a tutorial on spotting mold blooms and analyzing damages to books so that we could monitor the situation. And I'm proud to say that there has been no sign of mold in anything in the vault. So our lessons learned. Risk assessments and steps to reduce risks are well worth the time and effort, even if you think the likelihood of a problem is low. Learn the infrastructure of your environment well. Know your priorities so you can automatically check on them. Have key emergency numbers ready. Call the professionals. They're well worth the money. While many residents had volunteered to come with shop vacs and help out, the job exceeded the abilities of house shop vacs, and the office would have been flooded for much longer, and we almost certainly would have had more damage, have lost more equipment, and probably have had a severe problem with mold. It really is worth relying on the professionals to do the job right early on. Have all your computers and electrical equipment off the floor. And just a couple of tips for constructing a building that we learned through this process. Drywall should not rest on your foundation. Radiant floor heat helps. We wished we had had it. Our drying time would have been about half what it was if we had had radiant floor heat as originally planned. And don't let them talk you into putting a hot water heater in the ceiling. So, VACDARN. VACDARN's an organization that can really help municipal offices, all kinds of offices that have large collections relating to culture. It provides a lot of beneficial support, training. For training, it's training in risk assessment, preparedness, planning. How do you triage and deal with recovery during a disaster? And the training is important because it helps prepare for a disaster. It builds confidence, reduces stress. VACDARN can also provide assistance during the recovery period when you really need it because you're dealing with a lot. Even a small crisis can lead to a lot of work and a lot of checking on the health and status of your collections. They are also working to provide caches of supplies, which is really important because in a major emergency, the type of supplies you need are very bulky, hard to get. And by having regional caches, VACDARN volunteers can pick up things, deliver it to where they're needed, and provide it the support quickly without the organization having to figure out how to store all that bulk. So that's it for the crisis, but there are a couple of tips for just how do you do risk assessment and disaster planning. First off, take advantage of opportunities to learn. Know who to call for support, advice, and/or help at every process in the cycle or every step in the cycle. Make a long-term effort. When you first walk out of the disaster management or risk assessment type training, the number one feeling is being overwhelmed. Yes, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, and looking at the big picture of what you have to do is totally overwhelming. But if you accept it's a long-term project that will never be finished, it helps. Because what you're going to do is each time you try and tackle something, you're a little bit better and further along on this road that's going to last forever. Make a reasonable to-do list of obtainable goals. I usually start with 3 or 4 items and chip away at them, doing a little bit at a time. And sometimes it may take a year or more to knock something off that little list. Regularly update what you've done. There are 5 top projects that I would recommend doing. First of all, an inventory. You need to know what you have if you want to protect it. Then a risk assessment. you can do a quick version like the 10 to 15 minute walk that Rachel and I initially did after the workshop. And because of that quick walk, we already protected our collection in an emergency. Using the inventory to figure out your risk assessment. I actually went through in detail at one point, taking every portion of our vault and assessing it and color coding it with what's at risk for fire, smoke, water damage, what hasn't been backed up. So I had a very detailed risk assessment, which actually took months to put together because I worked on it for 15 minutes at a time. Make a list of priorities. And when you have that list of priorities, if it's a major emergency, already have an assignment of who's going to take care of what priorities. And a great tool I got from Rachel, the PREP, a pocket response plan. And this is ours. On one side, I have this list of phone numbers, which includes people from the town and town government, state officials, residents who volunteered to help out in an emergency, the first responders, the state archivist, utilities, local resources, emergency providers. Please note, ServPro's right there. And other contacts. I'm still missing some because again, this is something I've picked away at a little at a time. And on the back, I have the sort of, it's called a checklist, but it's a list of questions and responsibilities and provides a framework for running through, have you thought of everything during crisis? That's it for me for today. I'd like to turn it over to Rachel now.
Thanks so much, Carol, and thanks for that presentation.
You are welcome.
And I mean this as a compliment. This disaster couldn't have happened to a better person. You were prepared, and you have been doggedly, determinedly working through that cycle of assessment and preparation and mitigation and reassessment and preparation and mitigation for many, many months. So you all were so much more prepared than most. I say, looking around my office space, most of it, which has boxes of important things on the floor, most of us would be. So, and you've been willing to talk about it, which is also the other part of it, is the value of sharing some of the truly horrible things that can happen to our records and to other materials that we value. I did have one question for you as I was looking at all of those fans and dehumidifiers. Was the electrical capacity load, how did you manage that?
I don't think there was any problem with that. There was a problem with the bill that came in from our power company, because in that 1 8-day period, our electric bill was in the thousands. But I think we had the capacity. I'm not sure why and how, but that was something ServPro was taking care of.
They were taking care of. Okay. Yeah. And I'm not sure how much you want to talk about insurance, but were you and Amy aware of what your policy would cover in advance, or was part of what you had to do in that negotiating with, I mean, obviously you were going to call ServPro, but in terms of determining how much effort could be taken, did you have to consult your policy?
We didn't, Amy consulted the insurance company, but was basically told, do what you need to do, I think. Mm-hmm. And the select board was basic, if anything insurance wouldn't cover, they were going to be behind and support our doing what needed to be done. Mm-hmm. and they ended up paying for most of it.
That's great. Yeah, VACDARN's working right now with a large library that has experienced a mold bloom as an indirect result of a catastrophic equipment failure. So they dealt with the initial issues and got the HVAC system limping along again and put dehumidifiers in. And we're doing routine checks to make sure that the books weren't showing signs of a bloom, but it did come. And they've now burned through most of what their insurance will cover. And we're talking about how VACDARN might be able to help with kind of that longer tail of recovery, where the company they're working with said, look, we've gotten these materials, you know, the space is dry, the space is safe for people, and these books are just, they're hydroscopic, they're holding so much water that they need to be opened up, taken off the shelf, opened up and air dried. And that becomes a huge drain of resources. You don't have to be particularly skilled, but you need tables, you need space, you need the ability to have people who can take books and open them up and determine when they're sufficiently dry to go back on the shelf. So we're going to talk next week about how VACDARN can help with not an immediate response, but a longer term recovery that otherwise is going to be challenging to do. And it'll be a fun way of trying to, how do we engage with the community and get other folks involved as well. So Rick at the top of the session did mention some of the things that VACDARN is hoping to do this year, and Carol also brought up the disaster supply caches. We are focusing on some of these new initiatives and getting data loggers that will track temperature and humidity over time into town vaults, so we can do some environmental analysis to see what the conditions are in there. And we do, it is possible to get site visits and risk assessments done, but kind of indirectly through VACDARN. It would be myself and my colleague at the Vermont Historical Records Program, which is based at the State Archives, Sally Blanchard O'Brien. We provide technical assistance to all sorts of historical records repositories, and one of the things we can do is help identify risks within the storage vaults and help provide suggestions for what could be done to improve how things are stored and be better able to respond in the event of a disaster. And we do loads of trainings. Different groups get them. I've done some specifically for public libraries this year, as well as for small groups of historical societies, and been talking with the records managers at the State Archives about doing some joint trainings with them to talk about records management and disaster preparedness, which is something we'd done. We'd done several of those for groups of clerks and at the VMCTA meeting prior to the pandemic. So hoping to get out on the road again, maybe next spring, if not before, to provide that training. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. VACDARN website has lots of resources. VACDARN.org is the URL. And I want to make sure we have a little time for questions, so I'm going to shut up, and please either write them in the chat, or if Hillary allows you, unmute and talk. But I'm not sure if that's a possibility. Or raise your hand and maybe you can get that.
So thank you to Carol and Rachel. So questions can go in the chat. We have a little chat block. Feel free to ask any questions you have of the session. There's been some back and forth in the chat so far. Jan Sotorakis had written, could EMDs be added to the VACDARN listserv? And Rachel, you said absolutely. We were asking about what are the companies that can assist towns of Vermont for, flood and water damage and restoration. ServPro is the one that you had mentioned, Carol. So I think there's a bunch of them out there, Puro Clean, GW Savage, but ServPro is one of the bigger ones. They're a nationwide company. So there's others out there. Let's see. So yeah, there's some great resources being shared in the chat if you have questions. If you do want to, oh, here we go. Disaster Response Resources, Virginia Association of Museums, another resource. If you do want to ask questions and get on camera and talk, we ask that you do that in the lobby. Harry should be all set up. We can swap over to the lobby, the other room. Hillary just posted the link in the chat, so you can just click that link. That'll bring you over there. And we're going to come back here in, looks like 28 minutes and 30 seconds or so for our next presentation, which will be by Colonel Randy Gates of the Vermont National Guard, and he will discuss emergencies that the Vermont National Guard can help with. So that'll be back here at 2:45. With that, I'm not seeing any other chat questions or discussion, so I encourage everyone to go over to the lobby to chat and talk with our presenters. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It is 2:45, and we are now going to hear from Colonel Randy Gates of the Vermont National Guard. Colonel Gates is the Director of Military Support, which means that he is the whole of state resource coordinator for the Vermont National Guard assets during emergencies. He first joined the U.S. Army in 1983 and received commission as a second lieutenant in 1994. Colonel Gates has served on active duty in the U.S. Army Reserves and both the California and Vermont Army National Guards. He has commanded the 15th Civil Support Team when they responded to a possible weapon of mass destruction incident at Wake Robin several years back. And after 38 years, Colonel Gates is retiring on November 30th. This is going to be his last emergency preparedness conference as a member of the Vermont National Guard. Let's hope we can drag him back in some other capacity next year. But now we're going to hear him talk about what the National Guard's capabilities and response resources are and what they can do to help all of you in times of emergency. So, Colonel Gates, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the National Guard. We give this presentation every couple of years at the Preparedness Workshop, just to remind people of what the National Guard is and the different pieces of equipment, personnel expertise, things like that that reside in the Guard, and how a partner agency can ask for them during an emergency. So, can everybody see these slides? Have I shared them properly?
Not yet.
Okay, just a moment.
You just need to hit the little arrow facing up.
Got it. See, this is really why I'm retiring, because I can't catch up with technology.
You're doing great. Oh, we lost you.
I am still here. Okay. Got it now?
Oh, we see your presentation now, but we lost your face.
I'm good. I'm good for the time being. So when we have incidents, things happen. Whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster of some type, the National Guard has quite a lot of resource capability. Now, we're just a tiny state, and we have a small amount of a lot of different things, where you would imagine larger states such as New York or Pennsylvania or Louisiana or Texas or California. Those are some of our largest guards. Usually has a division of at least 20,000 soldiers. They would have a lot more equipment and would be better positioned to help their respective governors. One of the important things to understand about the National Guard is just how does it work? Because when you're in the active Army and when you're in the U.S. Army Reserves or the U.S. Air Force Reserves, you belong to the President. The President is the Commander-in-Chief and works down through a Secretary of Defense. I'm looking at the right side of the slide here. And the work is done through the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Air Force. And they can reach down to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, who in turn has the help of a Director of the Army National Guard, the Director of the Air National Guard, to reach down and get resources from the National Guard. About 60% of the entire force on the Army side is in the Guard and Reserves. So it's just a substantial amount of equipment and personnel that have to be at the ready. Now, if you look at the left side of the slide, the governor is our commander-in-chief, and it's set up that way in all 54 states and territories, where the governor is in charge, and generally the person that reports and advises that governor is the adjutant general. In this case here in Vermont, our adjutant general is Major General Gregory Knight. Major General carries 2 stars. And they work with the assistant adjutant general on the Army side, also called the Land Component Commander. That's General Pabus. And then there's the assistant adjutant general on the Air National Guard, and that person is in command of the air component, if you will, and that is General Harder, Brigadier General Harder. So, you know, that's the big thing I want you to take away from this slide, is that there is a constitutionally unique aspect to this, and that the states are in control of the National Guard, and the president is in charge of the reserves and the active components. But the president can reach down through different legal mechanisms and call up forces for use overseas. That is our primary focus, to be prepared for wars. The fact that we can bring a lot of this expertise and equipment to domestic operations is something that is unique to the states. Got a picture right here of General Doobie during Hurricane Irene. He's here with then Governor Shumlin and Sinnerly. He was in that helicopter also and took the picture. But this was flying over Rochester. Just to understand that the principal military advisor to the governor is the adjutant general. What are some of the missions that the Vermont National Guard would do? Well, we do have federal missions, we do have state missions, and we do have community missions. And I'll let you read the slide there. And, you know, we always need to be ready for a federal mission. We have a number of airmen and soldiers on overseas missions right now. You're probably familiar with a lot of them. They've been well covered in the media. And we had some of those forces that were in the Middle East actually were moved to Afghanistan to help with that, with the flights out of there when they were bringing Afghan civilians back here to the United States. That was a quick move of some of our Vermont forces, and then back to where they're working for the remainder of their mission. Then we have the state missions there, where we're providing trained and equipped units to protect life and property in order to preserve peace, order, and public safety upon the direction of the governor. And our most common partners that we work with, of course, is Vermont Emergency Management, and receiving requests from Director Borman. We also get a lot of calls from the Department of Health. And I would say probably the busiest partner that we work with is the Vermont State Police, because here in Vermont, the state police do not have a dedicated helicopter. They come to us a lot for search and rescue missions and things like that. And those happen frequently. And then at the community level, we do as much participation as we can in local and state programs that add value to our communities. When we were a horizontal construction, had the horizontal construction capability in the Vermont National Guard and our engineers. At one time, we used to do road repairs and things like that. We would build soccer fields at different high schools. We've lost that capability to some extent when we transitioned to combat engineers, but there are other things that we can do within a community, like flyovers, static displays, things like that. I want to give you a heads up on what I do as the Director of Military Support. I have a large steady state responsibility, and this includes the supervision of the 15th Civil Support Team, which is 22 active weapons of mass destruction experts located in South Burlington. And then we have the firefighting capability over at the Burlington Airport. And then we have a explosive ordnance disposal team, and then we have our JOC operations. So those are things that we do for day to day. Some days it's not as busy as others, but that's what we call steady state. Then we've got domestic operations training and planning. This is an example of that training right now. I take part in a lot of exercises. I take part in planning. Right now we're involved in the thyroid process as which started earlier in the week. We have input to that, for example. And then we are in charge of force protection of the Vermont Army National Guard. We have a robust team here to include installation emergency management, the anti-terrorism program, an insider threat program, the physical security to include the guards at Camp Johnson, who are state employees, and then the information and communication security of our systems here at Camp Johnson. So I'm not necessarily in charge of those things, but I have a lot of say in how the programs are conducted and seat at the table for a lot of that. This is probably the busiest slide on my presentation, and I can send the presentation to you on electrons later on if you want to really dig down into understanding the symbology behind all these things. But generally, if it's green on this slide, it's Army, and if it's blue, it's air, and then we have a couple of other things that are important to understand as resources. Probably the most important thing that I can assure Director Borman that we have at the ready are our National Guard response forces. And what those are is they're quick reaction forces. They're the forces that we can give to as a solution to something that's come up here in the state. If the state police are asking for an MP detachment, for example, as augmentation, until we can get that MP detachment ready, we might offer them a part of the National Guard response force until we can bring the MPs on. So these are forces that are trained on an annual basis and a little bit more ready than other soldiers and airmen that we might ask to come on orders. And the National Guard response forces are equipped through special congressional monies that come down to the state. So I get radios and things like that. Riot gear, for example, another one. We also have the 15th Civil Support Team, which is a weapons of mass destruction unit. Rich introduced me earlier about being in command at the time when the Wake Robin Bryson incident happened. We worked quite closely with the Federal Bureau of Investigation as that incident got spun up and reacted to. Weapons of mass destruction could include chemical, biological, and radiological. And we are in support of the other teams in New England. And our primary focus is if a weapon of mass destruction went off in the city of Boston, then all 6 New England-based CSTs would head towards Massachusetts to help with delineating warm and hot zones and things like that. It's 22 full-timers, 18 Army and 4 Air. And it's, in addition to being a regional asset, it's also a nationwide asset. We also, as I mentioned, have the explosive ordnance disposal team in the Air Guard side of the house. And then we also have the firefighting capability. I think a lot of people understand that the fire house on the on the air side at the airport is the airport's firefighting capability. And then the last thing I want to show you on this slide is aviation assets. So the little bow tie looking symbol, that's rotary aircraft. And we've got the ability to respond to search and rescue requests, for example, like I said, with the state police. That often is the case with skiers skiing out of bounds in the wintertime, or a hiker being injured on one of our high peaks or something like that. It also can include elderly people wandering around away from their home, for example, or some kind of support to a police effort, perhaps. When it comes to supporting a police effort, we usually have to bring the Adjutant General in for his advice on whether or not we're going to be able to do that legally. And then the growing concern that we have here in the Guard, and probably within your agencies, is cyber awareness and cyber capability. This is the new norm to be cyber resilient. There are adversaries out there that are testing our capability all the time. And the Guard has a small capability, but it is growing. Most recently, we helped out with the Ethan Allen, the hospital in Burlington when they had their systems compromised. So when we're trying to do planning here in the Guard, we really have to do an all hazards assessment of risk. And I have to look at those things that are most likely going to occur in any given year. And are we going to have extreme weather? Yes, we're probably going to have extreme weather, whether that's heavy snowfall in the winter, maybe heavy ice component, and in the summertime when we're reacting to tropical storms and like the preparation we had for Hurricane Ida just a couple of weeks ago. So if we're going to have those types of extreme weather, there's a good chance that the likelihood of flooding is going to occur too, so we have to plan for that. And then perhaps some man-made accidents. We're kind of looking at those being moderate to high, depending on how deliberate a potential adversary is. And then winter snow and ice storms. And then epidemics, before COVID arrived, we just considered this a moderate effect on the state. Well, that's taught us that epidemics in their duration can be a much greater effect on the state and how we react to that. And then we're lucky to be living here in Vermont, where we continue to understand that terrorism is a much lower challenge than other states. So there are a number of things that we worry about. And, when we look at an all hazards awareness, we have to understand that there are natural disasters beyond hurricanes and flooding and ice storms. So could be potential large hail. While it's remote, it could be a tornado. And while it's even more remote, there could be an earthquake. When Rich introduced me, he understood that I was in the California National Guard for a while. I got my commission out in California and was there for about 8 years in the California Guard. And we worried more about earthquakes in California than we worried about ice storms. So it really depends on what state you're in that really drives the most pressing planning needs for that state. We could worry about chemical attacks. Chemical attack would be a deliberate act from an adversary, but there could be industrial spills or things like that maybe state hazmat would be called into, and we would back them up on occasion. We also worry about biological diseases, and then the radiological nuclear explosive attacks. You can see those things down there. And then we're going to continue to talk about cyber because that's something that we continue to worry about. And you can just, without me telling you, you can look at those symbols and understand that Vermont's probably safe from most of these, just in where we are, how we're positioned, don't have any really large cities, we don't have a harbor. There's a lot of things that we don't have that actually make that a less attractive target, if you will, by an adversary. So this slide gives you a good understanding of a lot of different things that the National Guard construes as core capabilities. And we can do a lot of these things here in the Vermont National Guard. So if you look at our little symbols down below, you can see that things in blue are steady state and things in green are internal to Vermont, things that we can do without going to ask for help. And then those things that are in red are things that we know where they are, in which states, and how we go about getting them through a EMAC. Now, I have 2 big conferences that I attend. Right now they're still virtual, but usually they're in person. One is the National Domestic Operations Workshop in November, and then that's followed by more engaging all hazards coordination workshop, usually in Louisiana in March. And down there in Louisiana at that conference, we would describe our gaps to all the participating states, and then try to fill them with units that they have that capability. And then we are very much a receiving state because we're one of the smaller states, but there are some things that we can give to other states. I'll have a slide on that in just a moment. So you can see the things that we can do here in Vermont. Now, from time to time, we lose force structure here in Vermont, or we gain force structure. Those are things that I let Director Borman know when it looks like we're going to be losing some kind of force structure, like let's say a transportation company moves to another state. If we're not able to fill that through recruiting, the National Guard Bureau might take that asset on paper and move it to another state so that they can actually fill those positions. So if we lose a truck company, then potentially we lose high water vehicles that could be used during flooding recovery operations. But generally when I get an understanding that there's potential loss of force structure, I let Director Borman know so that she's aware of that. And up through the Department of Public Safety and this information will probably eventually make it to the governor's desk, and the tags advising him of that stuff at the same time. So when we're talking disaster response here in the Vermont National Guard, there's a lot of considerations. And do we try to be cost effective? Do we try to be mistake free? Or do you want us to be fast? And we can do those, but not all at the same time. So kind of ask you to be one. So generally when you're asking us to get out there fast, then we try to make it cost effective later down the road, but it might not be real cost effective right out the gate. And there's a potential for mistakes when we're moving really fast, a lot of moving pieces to a recovery operation or a response operation, I should say. This picture is from when we were transporting water during the recovery for Hurricane Irene. One thing that's important to understand, and it's something I advise on pretty quickly when discussions are starting about using Guard resources, is that there's eventually going to be a bill payer. Now, like Congress frees up money for response and recovery operations, and sometimes that's reimbursable to the state. Other times we have to be concerned with competing with civilian capabilities. So if we are having a wind event that knocks down a lot of trees, it might make sense to have the National Guard remove a lot of those trees from major supply routes or major roads getting to hospitals and things like that. But at some point, we have to pull back, and it has to be a private entity like Bartlett Tree Service or something that does that through contracts or something. We can't displace the economic opportunity with private business. It's for immediate response, we can use that, but at some point we need to pull back. And that's a big responsibility of mine when I'm at the State Emergency Operations Center, is to keep Director Borman kind of briefed on where that line's being reached. So this is one of the slides that I use at my presentation during the domestic operation, the all hazards coordination workshop. We have a 2-star general that arrives from National Guard Bureau, generally the chief of plans. And we have to kind of give them a quick down and quick look at what Vermont is capable of doing. So, you can look at that slide and understand that we have capability, but we don't have a lot of it in some cases. And we talk about using a 4-tiered system where we are currently in our steady state operations, and then we have a response capability to a declared emergency. And then at some point we might set up a joint task force, or JTF, there that is in size according to the response requirements for however big the event is. If it's a statewide event, like a high wind event that's knocked down a lot of trees, maybe a hurricane's reached us with some ferocity, then we might set up a large joint task force. If it's a localized flooding thing, it might be a small joint task force. And sometimes joint task force entails both Army and air side, and it could even entail the use of Title 10 or full-time forces coming from Fort Drum, for example. And the use of Title 10 troops is its own can of worms. It has a lot of legalities that we have to consider in our planning. And when we do use Title 10 troops, that commands, that sort of stands up the last part of that 4-tiered system, which is a dual status command. It's where a commander is identified, is in charge of both National Guard troops Entitled Time Troops. It's a well-crafted legal mechanism that isn't used very often, but we have to identify those potential commanders and get them trained to a certain level before they're picked by the Adjutant General to be that dual status commander. And then for domestic operations response, we also track planned events. We're already in discussions with the small planning group down in Killington for the 4th World Cup this November. When the Burlington Marathon starts again, we're involved in that. We have National Guard resources at those events, for example. I made a mistake earlier. I said that was the busiest slide. This is actually the busiest slide. And this gives you an understanding of the product that comes out of the All Hazards Coordination Workshop. So on the far left of that, you see the capability that we have. And then and the second colored columns there, the incident types, incident type 1 being the most serious. It gives you an example of what we look at here in Vermont of our capability, and where we start losing a lot in incident type 2 there. So we have to go out and find that. So we state the EMAC requirement in the 3rd column, and then we look at the 4th column there, right in the middle of the slide, on which states are going to help us out. So if I've got a requirement of, say, for example, in aviation of 3 UH-60 companies, well, I go to all those states, New Hampshire and Connecticut and New York and Pennsylvania and Michigan, for example. All those states have agreed that if they're not engaged themselves, then they could probably help us out. This is almost like pre-EMAC coordination. So I don't have to scramble all over the map to try to find resources. If we had an EMAC requirement, I could go to states where we already did the organization or their coordination. Now, if it's a hurricane and it comes up through New England, chances are New Hampshire and Connecticut wouldn't be able to help us out, but perhaps Michigan and Pennsylvania would, or maybe more Michigan than Pennsylvania. So this slide gives you a good understanding of how we coordinate that. And then the last 2 columns are things that we could give up and agreements that we have with existing states. That's actually better shown in this slide, which is giving you a good understanding of all the things that, all the states that we have agreements with, some with receiving and some with giving. And as soon as that hurricane situation got worse down in Louisiana, we called down there to see if they were going to need the resource that they were asking for. They were asking for a battalion of multi-capability battalion, if you will. And then we do get EMAC requests from time to time, and we got one from Louisiana just a couple of days ago for some medical people, and we're all set to launch that. We had the resource, the tag was on board, but they called back and said that they had a quicker, more closer resource that they got agreed to, and they let us off the hook, if you will. So these are prearranged agreements that are shown on this slide, but different agreements from different states can come down through our connection with the National Guard Bureau through our Joint Operations Center at any time. And you can imagine the requests that we're getting from Oregon and California, to some extent Washington right now, for aviation assets. They ask for them every week, but we're in a place where our aircraft are prepared for a future use that we're just not able to answer those calls, but we get them constantly for fire crews to continue fighting those wildfires out there. I want to transition now to one of the big things that we do here in the Vermont National Guard, and that's prepare our liaison officers. And I want to invite you to attend our future liaison officer training, generally in the January or February timeframe. Director Borman has gone through the program. A lot of her staff have gone through the program, and it's not necessarily to train you to be an LNO. It's to train you to understand how we train our LNOs and give you good visibility on that. So, we put together a 2-day training module that's been distilled pretty well after giving it for 10 years. to prepare selected officers and non-commissioned officers to be that person that shows up in a town to help that emergency manager understand resources that are available, be that conduit to request resources, be that conduit to report back to the Joint Operations Center, and basically be that liaison to greater resources. So that person's main job is to translate civ speak into mill speak and mill speak into civ speak. So, you know, we speak the same language, English, but there can be a lot of complications in trying to get our capability across to best describe it, for example. So similar to the slide several back that gave you a good understanding of all the things that we can do in the National Guard across the country, these are the things that soldiers and airmen can do. And we have a lot of expertise. Sometimes our depth isn't great for some of these things, but we do have this capability to some extent. And you know, we're going to look at community liaison, and we're going to talk about interagency liaison. And, you know, what does that mean when we place soldiers and airmen into the communities? How do we augment our eyes and ears, if you will, in those communities that are suffering and need, potentially need Guard resources to recover? So these are some of the things that we look for in a good L&O. We don't just place anybody in the training. We ask the commanders to really think this through and to give us their best. We don't ask for the B or C team. We go right after the A team and then train them for those roles. So these are the, when an L&O is fully trained and capable of being deployed to be that representation for the National Guard at either the State Emergency Operations Center as augmentation for my team, or with a state agency. For example, we've got a lot of L&Os working with the Department of Health right now for many months now as part of our COVID support, or placed in the community. These are the things that they are trained to do once they've completed their training. How do they advise that supported organization? How do they assist? How do they monitor? And how do they coordinate? So they can advise on certain things that are available and then maybe coordinate the arrival of those resources. But those are the four big things that an L&O really has to be competent. So this is our instruction. Generally, the first day, it's a lot of in-depth, you know, understanding of National Guard core capabilities, understanding what Vermont emergency management is. Director Borman normally has one of her staff members give that brief. We talk about things that we can understand as L&O functions and L&O core capabilities, intelligence support, and things like that. And then the second days generally are community partners coming in and briefing on their capabilities. And sometimes we don't have time for all of those in any given year, so we'll rotate those. So one year we might have the state police and Army Aviation and the United States Coast Guard, where the following year we might have the American Red Cross, for example, instead. So it was shortened to one day. We really had to distill it 2 years ago when we were first dealing with COVID, but this next one in 2022 should be back to 2 days. So we require ICS 100 of everybody just to get into the course, and we let them understand that there's an online opportunity there. And then we recommend that they go do the full 200 through 400 at some point, and then we've got the further expectation that 700, 800 are done. And then if we've got the funding, and we asked them to do DISCA Phase 1, and DISCA Phase 2 is a week-long course taught by the Northern Command instructors out of Colorado. And that is just a real in-depth course to give you a good understanding of not just National Guard capability, but capability that resides within the entire Department of Defense. And that course is open to civilians also. So if it's something you think your organization or state department or something like that would be interested in sending you, then we can help arrange that. So we construe L&Os as being successful when they can accurately and timely exchange information, and they keep Vermont National Guard leadership informed of the missions that we're conducting, the status of missions of adjacent state and federal agencies. Generally, when it's a regional event, we're talking very closely with New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York, our counterparts over there. And there are some things that in that advising role, the L&O has to let that state agency or that department and agency understand what they can and cannot do. And we always have to worry about mission creep, where we're in there and they're asked, oh, can you just do this? Or can you do a little bit more? Or can you extend that requirement a little bit more? We really have to watch closely that that doesn't happen, because basically we're prioritizing resources here within the Vermont National Guard. And if you're getting resources, you've been prioritized, but that could change as the recovery evolves, if you will. So that's down and quick understanding of what the Vermont National Guard can do. I always like putting this Dilbert cartoon in, because I just like Dilbert, and they're talking about emergency management there. So let me get to my screen here to see if there's anything in the chat that I may have missed.
At this time, there's no questions.
That's either my awesome instruction or I just didn't. Oh. So
people are congratulating you though on your retirement.
Yeah, I've been on an extension for the last year because of COVID. The Adjutant General asked me to stick around for another year this past year. And 38 years, I'm not quite sure where it went, but it did go. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Colonel. Great presentation. It's always great to hear, and I've heard this several times, but it's always great. It's a great refresher for me to hear what the capabilities of the National Guard are, what you can offer to us. Some comments here. Thanks for a great presentation. That was awesome. If VEM isn't available, who do we contact for support? Well,
so they could call the Joint Operations Center. And that person we have, while we're not at 24-hour coverage anymore, we have sort of like a watch capability on non-duty hours, and they can call that 1-802-338-3050, and that starts the process to get a hold of me or whoever my successors can be identified. And go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. We at Emergency Management have somebody who's on call 24 hours a day, as well, as we heard Brett LaRose speak about yesterday. Emily just posted our number in the chat, so you can always reach out to us. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, then you're going to get state police who will page us and we'll call you back. Very similar to what Colonel Gates just mentioned for the Guard. So it's not going to be you call that and we're picking up on the second ring. But we will call you back, and we're usually quite timely on that. All right, if there's nothing else in the chat, Colonel Gates, we'd love to have you over to the lobby to answer questions from folks. And then everyone else, please head on over to the lobby. As we've said throughout our virtual conference, that is your spot to basically chat with us, chat with our speakers, ask questions and whatnot. And we can talk with you. If there's something you don't want to take up everyone's time, you can obviously chat with us offline and get a hold of us that way. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 22 minutes or so. Hey folks, welcome back from break. Thank you all for sticking with us. This is our last session of our 3-day conference. I think this is probably my last opportunity to speak to all of you. So I just want to say thank you for joining us for this conference. It's been a great conference, a lot of wonderful speakers covering a whole variety of topics. Everything from flooding to how do you deal with your town office being flooded, to what can the Guard provide? How do you get a hold of us at Emergency Management? How do you operate virtually? As well as yesterday's final presentation was amazing, all about mapping the fire service response times. It was just great. So our final presentation of the day is by Robert Mahoney, and he is the Regional Prevention Coordinator for the New England region for Department of Homeland Security Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, which is a mouthful, so they just call it CP3. Rob has a deep love for the state of Vermont as he regularly visits the state to see extended family and to take advantage of the best ski mountains on the East Coast during the winter. Rob has a master's degree in emergency and disaster management, along with over 15 years with the prevention preparedness arena at all levels of government. His presentation today focuses on the mission of CP3 and the services that his office offers to state and local agencies to help in the fight against violent extremism. And before I hand it completely over to Rob, I gotta know, Rob, as a skier myself, what's your favorite mountain here in Vermont?
Oh, you can't go wrong with Killington. You can't go wrong with Killington. Beast of the East. Beast of the East.
You cannot go wrong. I do have to chuckle. My final runs last season were at Killington in April, and it was just phenomenal. It was awesome. 70 degrees. But anyway, I digress. Rob, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you for our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will throw it in here. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
have it.
All right, wonderful. If there are certain things that are a little unclear, I will gladly go off camera and just make this full screen. But is it easy to read right now?
I can read it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I will start. So thank you very much, everybody. It is a pleasure to be speaking to all of you and to be an presenter here at this conference. We are a relatively new office. There have been a lot of counterterrorism missions within DHS over the years under a lot of different names. And this one is no different. When I first came on about a year or so ago, we were called the Office of Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention. With the administration change, we changed our name to the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. We believe that more accurately details what we kind of do, and I am very excited to go through what it is that we do. And here we go. All right. So this is a little bit of an outline of what we will do. We will talk about some of the definitions that we have along with our mission, our public health model, which I will go into, and our local prevention frameworks that we are looking to augment or help us establish in some cases. And then towards the end here, you see lines of effort and programming. Those are sort of fancy words for just detailing the services that CP3 can provide. This is our vision and our mission. I would focus in on the mission. You see whole of society. That is sort of our bread and butter. We believe at DHS and at CP3 that we all have a role to play in the prevention of extremist violence. We realize that the state and locals might already have a framework in place to prevent these sort of attacks that works for you, and we are simply looking to provide the services to help augment that framework. We are not here to sort of reinvent the wheel or divert any kind of communications away from what has already been established within the state of Vermont or within your local jurisdiction. So what is our definition of prevention? So we have taken a public health model approach to that. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that we're shifting responsibility to the public health sector for this type of work and taking it away from law enforcement, but rather recognizing the need for more public health interventions with individuals who are exhibiting the behaviors that might move them to radicalized violence. One example that I would say is from a prevention standpoint, active shooter training is a wonderful, whether it's in your place of work or your school, is a wonderful prevention training. However, we are trying to go a little bit farther to the left with our version of prevention. We would like to intervene in those individuals before they have gone the route of feeling that they need to shoot up their place of work or a school. Targeted violence, you'll see here, regardless of motives. This is important because so often some of this work gets politicized. We are not here to fight against any one ideology. We are really fighting against behaviors. I could show you manifestos from a Muslim extremist and a white supremacist that almost mirror one another with their ideological mission, that it is all the Jews' fault, that their race is trying to be exterminated, that society needs to move closer to God. These individuals just took two separate paths, but the core behaviors and motivations that they exhibit are very similar. So that's an important piece that at CP3 we like to make note of, that we are not here to target one type of ideology, but we are here to try and combat certain behaviors. This is our definition of terrorism. You will see the categories down below. These are the categories that DHS and FBI use to categorize motivations. Obviously, a person can have multiple grievances and motivations. We often see people who carry out attacks have sort of threaded together different grievances and motivations into a narrative that works for them. This is why we believe that pushing information to the public about risk factors, different behaviors is so important. This is a visualization of our public health model. For some people who might be within the public health sector, this mirrors a lot of the suicide prevention models that are so often in the public health space. With each level, obviously, there is a greater risk to violence and occurring and an escalation in intervention tactics. CP3 likes to operate in that blue and green area. We are able to operate in every area, but the blue and green is really where we feel we have the most leverage and the most ability to off-ramp these individuals before they go and do an attack. Local prevention frameworks. So we feel that these are the ingredients to a successful framework. We understand that not all of these might be present or be able to be at 100% capacity. But we put this slide up here to just reiterate our commitment to you, our local and state partners, that you have at your fingertips a lot of federal resources within the region and agencies and services that can assist in helping boost, augment the frameworks that are already in place. And we'll go through some of those services that we can provide in a little bit later. The role of bystanders. this is a huge thing, and this is one of the reasons why we do what we do. Most prevention work, at least from the law enforcement arena, you will see there is an information gathering mentality. They want to know who the individual is. They want to know who they've been talking to. They want to know what websites they're going on, et cetera, et cetera. We look at prevention from another way. We look at it as a push of information to the public, and bystanders are a huge part of that. We have seen over recent years many attacks, and after those attacks, there is always somebody that comes out, whether it's a family member, a coworker, a family friend, that there was a telegraphing of this person's intent. But they didn't know who to call, or they hadn't done anything illegal yet, so there was no way to really truly intervene, or they were scared to get the police involved. And we feel at CP3 this is a lane where we can help. We are not a law enforcement entity, but we have, which I will go through a little bit later, a number of different services that we can provide to sort of help off-ramp individuals that bystanders are being concerned about. This is our structure. I kind of straddle, as the regional prevention coordinator here in New England, a little bit of all of these. The one that I have the least amount, but probably everybody has the most interest in, is that grants and innovation. We do have a separate pool of money set aside. It's for grants. I do not control how that money is dispersed. Last FY, we had about $20 million that went out across the country. It is application based. So this is different from the FEMA DHS money that goes out to the states. This is a separate pool. You have to apply for it, and it has to be related to prevention, violence work. I can serve as a conduit to our grants program. I also am in charge of letting people know when the notification of funding opportunities arises. I will tell you, for those who are interested, it is going to be sometime in October, and I am sure that you will hear either from me directly, or you will hear from some sort of, announcement list that we send out, that it is when that NOFO becomes public. Strategic engagement team. So this is where we go into sort of our first service. So we are conduits to a multitude of different organizations and experts in their field in off-ramping individuals. And we encourage anyone who is looking at having a case where maybe law enforcement has gone as far as they can go, or having somebody who needs some mediation or intervention, to contact us, and we can set you up with an off-ramping sort of specialist. And these are sort of the sectors that we touch in. So we try to be as bespoke or tailored as possible. We understand that, there are individuals that can be connected on religious grounds. Veterans, talking to other veterans often helps. People who specialize in high school students or younger, former radicals who have left that or who have been off-ramped to talk to individuals. And we use arts and entertainment or sports or different community organizations to try and reach those individuals as best we can. It does no good for us to just send somebody who does, off-ramping of schools to, somebody who might have just returned from Afghanistan and is having a lot of trouble trying to integrate back into society. So when you call CP3, we try to get a little bit of information on that individual just so that we can tailor the recommended person, counselor, organization as best we can. One of the other things that we like to stress is that this is a soft touch sort of connection. Who we recommend to you, they do not report back to us, and there is nothing that we will contact you to get a report of who this individual was, what were they saying, etc. This is simply a connect, and we make the connection for you, and then you take it from there. And whoever we put you in contact with, it is understood that they will wrap into the framework that already exists. This is the second service that we provide. This is our digital forums. These happen a couple months or so, and they cover a multitude of different topics. We have experts in their field that everything is online. Obviously, it's a digital forum, but everything from sovereign citizens to incels to recruitment techniques, message board awarenesses. They are great forums where a lot of great information is dispensed. And I highly encourage, and I do send out notifications to my contact list within the region when these are being presented. So the field ops team, that's me. So these are some of the things that I'm responsible for and what I do. One of the other topics, or the services that I provide, is sort of education and information sharing. You'll see later in the slide deck, the community awareness briefing, but I'll mention it now. The community awareness briefing is sort of a latest and greatest briefing. We have input from FBI, Secret Service, our own DHS information and analysis, who gather up a lot of information and help us create a brief that is an awareness brief for the public. This goes in depth into identifying risk factors, different behaviors. We have case studies that are often regional or state specific, and it just puts out a lot of information so that people are knowledgeable that if you come across somebody who only wears flowery shirts or Hawaiian shirts, it might just be that they like Hawaiian shirts, or it could mean that they identify as a Boogaloo boy. And maybe you have seen somebody online who posts a lot of pictures online and does a certain hand symbol, seems rather innocuous, but might have be signaling something of white supremacy or something like that. So that's all in the brief. And it's really just a knowledge and education and information sharing package. All of it is unclassified, so nobody that we present it to needs any kind of clearances or anything else. This is all stuff that if you had the time to research it online, you could, but we just package it in a nice 90-minute brief, and we present it to anybody that you would like us to do it with. So we can tailor that brief to the audience. As I said, we have different case studies that are state and regional specific, but we can also tailor the brief to a more public health audience or to a school audience or just a general audience, whoever it is. We will do a preview with you and we can go over the brief and see what works and what doesn't. This is our current makeup. There's actually a little bit more people than this. Some take regions, some take states. I cover all 6 states within the New England area, but this just gives you an idea of where we're currently located and where my counterparts are. And this again is our third service on top of grants, on top of the digital forums, on top of the recommendations. We do a lot of these different briefings. And we are in the process of doing a train the presenter. So the idea that I can attend, 6 states and do a cab in each state is a little bit of a stretch for me. So we are beginning a train the presenter program where we will probably have different people that can do a cab by themselves within each and individual states. This is just some information on our grants team. We have 2 grants that are within the New England area. It is Operation 250 out of Lowell, and the Boston Children's Hospital also has a grant. They focus more on schools, but they do have a network of different counselors and contacts that might be able to help you with a more tailored approach. If you had a certain individual, we could have that discussion. We don't push any of our grantees. So just because they're a grantee doesn't mean that they are the only people that we will recommend. We have a number of relationships with a lot of organizations who aren't receiving grant money from us that we will recommend as well. The FY21, the $20 million has been awarded to a number of different organizations, but they have not been made public yet. So I can't mention who they are. And as I said, the notification of funding opportunities we have been told for the next FY will come out in about October. These are sort of the priorities that when you do apply for our grants, that we sort of focus in on. Again, it is application based. I can set you up with somebody in our grants team that can help you walk through the process or help you with your application. But again, I do not control who gets the money or how much the money allocated is. I simply serve as a conduit for knowledge that the NOFO is open. These are the current grantee locations. As I mentioned, there's 2 in Massachusetts, but there's a number, as you can see, across the country. These are 2-year grants for anyone who's interested, just for your knowledge. Our policy and research team. This is more of a sort of DC-centric slide that we put in here, but we put it in here just to let you know that they do take a lot of information from us out in the field about what is happening on the ground level, where the gaps are, and where they can assist. So we pretty much have a conduit almost straight to the DHS Secretary's office, and they monitor us routinely. They ask us a lot of questions about what we're seeing in our region, what the states are telling us, what our local counterparts are telling us is concerning them, and so they are well aware of that. And just to let you know that they do change their policy and research goals based upon that. So going forward, and the reason why I'm so honored to be a part of this convention is I'm really asking you to help me out. We look at this as the state has 2 hands firmly on this wheel. I come from a FEMA background. I worked at FEMA for quite a while at headquarters, so I'm very sensitive to the state sort of driving the initiatives. This brief is really just to showcase our menu. You may take whatever you like out of that menu, as much or as little as you want. We simply are here to showcase the services that we have. If you want to take a little bite of one or the other, that's great. If you would like me to talk to somebody that you know might benefit from our services, please, by all means, get in touch with me, and we can make that happen. We are happy to do that. I'm happy to do another brief like this. I'm happy to do a CAB preview. I'm happy to do whatever you would need me to do. That is my role here. But I will use you as the gatekeepers. I do not want to ruin any relationships that you already have with these individuals in these organizations. So I simply ask that you utilize me as needed, and I will let you sort of lead me in whatever direction you want. And here are some of the contact information. Here's my contact, as well as our website, where you can get a lot more information about what we do, some education requests and general requests. You can use those different emails that are there. And with that, I will close. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Robert. And so an exciting thing that we're going to try here, we haven't tried this yet, but we're going to try allowing microphones for all of our attendees right now. So if anyone has any questions for Robert, rather than us migrating over into the lobby, if you could please unmute your microphone now, and we'll see how this goes. Any questions for Robert? Again, you can simply unmute your microphone. You should be able to now by selecting the microphone button at the top of your screen. And Robert, we're looking at my face on your screen.
Oh, okay. Stop. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Any questions for Robert? Or if you don't feel comfortable unmuting, you can note your question in the chat. Okay, well, thank you again so much, Robert. I really appreciate it. This presentation and all our presentations are going to be available for folks to view after if they're interested in it. So again, thank you so much, Robert. And I do just have a couple of closeout slides for everyone, so if you'll bear with me for one moment here. So just a couple of reminders and notes and everything for this virtual conference. Hopefully this is our last fully virtual conference. So first, thank you to all of our generous speakers for giving up their time, as well as our excellent conference staff. So these are the folks that have given their time over the last 3 days to make sure that we are a better prepared state. So we've got Scott Whittier, Peter Steinman. I'll actually just let you read on the slide in case this jogs your memory of someone you wanted to reach out to after the fact. I also wanted to say one more congratulations to our 2021 Vermont Emergency Management Director of the Year, Thomas Hanley from Middlebury. As I noted in the lobby for folks who had migrated over there afterwards, he's already on the wall in the Emergency Operations Center. So once we're able to be together again, you can see his name on our perpetual plaque there. Also, congratulations to those who went above and beyond and became certified emergency management directors over this last year. It is a commitment. There's a lot of time and training that goes into it, but it really makes sure that you're preparing your municipality and your area to be better prepared in case of an emergency. So it includes classes like the Incident Command System and Emergency Operations Center interface, Incident Command System courses, Red Cross Shelter fundamentals, as well as participating in both discussion-based and operations-based exercises. Just a quick reminder, it was noted at the beginning, but you will be receiving a participant feedback form at the conclusion of today's conference. Please make sure to fill out that form. We look at these every year. It includes questions about what kinds of sessions would you like to see in the future, how you rank each session, and why did you do that. We share that information back with our presenters so that they can become better presenters or keep up the great work. And we keep all of the information that you share in mind as we plan our next conference, which is a lovely segue to thank you for joining us again today. And we hope that you'll join us in person on January 20th at Lake Morey in Fairleigh, Vermont. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, we're just going to hang out in here I like the comment in the chat that they wouldn't be able to attend in person. There's actually a question in the feedback form saying, should we have some element that's virtually offered? So please, please, please make sure to fill out that feedback form so that we know how we can best serve you. And with that, if there are any questions or comments, feel free to turn on your microphone. A few of us will hang out in here until everyone decides that they don't have anything else to say.